Hello and welcome to Nikon Report, your weekly roundup of all the latest Nikon news and all other photographic announcements that we found interesting. It's Konstantin here, and here is
Becky.
It's an aftermath.
It is.
Of the massive version 2.0 firmware update for Z9, Z6 Z7 2 firmware updates. There's a memory card release and MC something N10, whatever that is.
MCN10.
Spot on, yes, announcement on that. So that's all happened last week. We had to stay longer to record that video for you.
We did.
And people loved it. Let's just look at the feedback so far we've got. What's your impression so far?
I think overall it's been very positive. I think it's very positive. I think by the time this video comes out, everyone's going to be doing their updates already. So by that time, we'll have some more kind of real world ideas of what it's like. But we will be doing our own updates to see what happens, and we're going to let you know how we get on. Absolutely. But we have had some positive comments on our own video that announced the firmware updates. Obviously, the videos that we talked about where people such as Rishi and some of the US photographers had actually already updated their Z9s. Those comments were very positive, but here's some feedback from ours.
All right, so first one up, we have Bait Master John. He says, personally, I'm absolutely over the moon about pretty much everything in this update, particularly the video features. Nikon has effectively turned a flagship stills camera into a flagship mini cine camera that also happens to be arguably the best stills camera in the market. I'm so happy they included the waveform and absolutely critical info display, and it means that you won't need external monitor for dialing exposure when shooting raw and analog video.
There you go. Then we have C-Funk Productions.
Yeah, because he's a cinematographer, he writes about the idea of that grip.
Oh, yeah.
So we as a stills photographer, we weren't particularly sure what the grip does. And all we thought that it's actually attached to your tripod video head, and then it gives you all the buttons. That is true. But that mount is actually an RE style attachment. And effectively, it can be attached to any rig. So imagine your camera, your Z9, is not only gimbal, but it's a shoulder mounted. So having that grip on the side makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
Because if you're filming on your camera, you got all your buttons effectively there. And so my hope is that it's also going to be compatible with obviously the future Nikon Z cameras, but also maybe Z6, Z7, Z5, and some DX cameras as well.
Yeah, well, what he said was, can't wait for the grip attachment. As a cinematographer, I can tell you this is a very valuable tool. Don't know that I would use it for stills. He goes on to say, the new Nikon extender essentially replaces one of your hand grips so that you can operate the camera on your shoulder without having to do gymnastics to reach the controls, which at this point are somewhere high above your right ear. So much harder to do that. I think one thing that we don't always appreciate is because we're not cinematographers, we don't look at the uses in a practical situation.
As Becky said in our last video, we are small camera users.
Yes. He goes on to say, if you shoot video a lot in a shoulder mount or heavily rigged up configuration, this new attachment would make your life much easier.
Yeah, and some people commenting that ProRes feature, generally ProRes codec on cameras, on DSLRs and mirrorless cameras, generally you have to pay for.
Right.
So Nikon is giving it for free.
Yay.
You know, now you can argue that the price of the camera, yada, 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 but just look that historically that ProRes update is generally charged for. So this one is thrown in.
Yes. Points to Nikon for that. Now, we did have a few comments on wish lists for future upgrades, and I think we've had a few emails from you all on things that you want to add.
So one of the criticisms of the firmware was that the pre-shooting button is actually only for JPEGs, and the first one on the wish list would be for that, to enable RAW for pre-recording, and 20 frames per second RAW is, I think, possible. So it's just maybe Nikon needs a bit more time to enable this.
Yes, I think they were keen to also get out this firmware update as quickly as possible, considering that the video upgrades were promised at the point that the camera was originally announced. But I have faith in them that they can add RAW as a possibility there. They will continually add firmware updates and features to this camera going forward. I'm almost 100% sure.
So we've read some comments on the forums on the internet, and there's a good list that we've compiled from the firmware upgrades wish list. So the first one up is pre-record. So effectively, they recommend 2 seconds, maybe 5 seconds, maybe even 10 seconds in the future. Wow. You never know.
Shocking. False color.
All right, this is for video.
Right.
Again, that's something that you will be able to get in something like Atmos Ninja or Blackmagic Recorder. So again, that's one of those video features that might be useful for videographers.
Great. And then we've got on-camera LUT support.
Yeah, so it's a lookup table, would allow you to effectively throw in your LUT into the memory card like a picture control or film simulation, and allow you to activate that look on your camera while you're filming. Generally, it is useful because you can then preview the image you will be getting. And it would be even more interesting if you can shoot with a LUT, but actually still get the flat image for the later grading as well.
Then we have a 48 frames per second option. Now we have 50 frames per second, but not 48 frames per second, which is obviously double the 24 frames per second speed.
Yeah.
Now that's quite region specific.
Yeah, so 48 is effectively, if you're thinking the cinematography as a 24 frames per second, so and then television, UK television, European television at 25 frames per second, so Pulsicam, remember that?
Yes.
And then NTSC at 30 frames per second. So obviously we have 30 and 60 frames per second enabled there, so we have 25 and 50. So people are suggesting to have 48 frames per second. Is it that important? I don't know, but I'm not a videographer, so what do I know?
You know nothing.
I know nothing.
Jon Snow. Anamorphic modes.
Okay, well, that one is generally you would probably need an anamorphic lens to start with, but at the same time, if you have it built in, so you have to squeeze and de-squeeze, that would be quite useful.
Then we also have gyroscope metadata access.
Okay, so that is effectively would help for the footage once you record it. So the software, while you, let's say, apply stabilization in the software, like let's say Premiere Pro or Final Cut or something like this, then this data would help that software to find the points. So gyroscope is the thing in your phone or your camera. So when things are moving, it's recording all the axes. So that would help the software effectively to stabilize the image after that.
Great. And then we have focus peaking. Obviously, this is for video rather than for stills because we do have it in stills. They've said would certainly help, especially when not using an external monitor.
I agree. I also would like Nikon to release a slightly fine-tuned version of focus peaking. The focus peaking that we have now works reasonably well, but if you're shooting very shallow depth of field, sometimes you just miss. So you may look that the subject isn't focused, so effectively it's highlighted in a false color, whatever you choose, let's say red. Then you take a shot and actually see if it's slightly behind or at the front, and you can change the sensitivity of it to fine, normal, and wide, but none of them tend to work really well if you're shooting wide open. So I would ask Nikon to maybe fine-tune it a little bit, and at the moment I have to sometimes rely on a little rangefinder at the bottom of the screen.
Yes, with Z cameras also, if you've got a CPU manual focus lens, you can wait for the focus point to go green, which is the same
So
thing.
with a, let's say, void lens that just came out, the 35 1.2 lens, that is the case.
Yeah. And then we have pixel shift.
Okay, this one, that's something that I personally look forward to. So we've seen it implemented by Olympus and other companies. Fujifilm does that as well. So effectively, it allows to use the vibration reduction on the sensor to record the larger image. So effectively, you're recording several images, and then you construct an image, let's say 200 megapixel image out of 45 megapixel image. Who it would help? Well, commercial photographers who need large output.
Yeah.
So, it doesn't generally add more details, at least from, if you're looking at something like GFX 100, if you look at the reports there, people say that actually there's not much information included in that file. Arguably, of course, but it's worth having, especially if you need a large print. And obviously, it's no good for moving subjects. So it has to be really still a studio setup.
Yeah, I'm thinking of, people who maybe do commercial photography for large products like cars and things like that in a studio environment where they would tend to possibly even use a medium or a large format in order to get all that information. And then they're going to print it and put it on a billboard. That's the only instance that I can really think would be useful for.
Absolutely. If you have more suggestions what Nikon can improve with their camera, specifically for Z9, do let us know in the comments below.
We'd be happy to hear it.
Yeah, now we also have obviously Z6 and Z7 too, firmware updates. We talked about in our last video, so have a look at that. We are eagerly waiting to try it on our cameras here because the feature list was quite small. What generally Nikon does with firmware upgrades, they don't say us a lot about what's done in there. But then when we put it on the camera, like with Z6 and Z7, autofocus improvements, the improvement was quite significant. So fingers crossed, we hopefully will try the firmware very soon, and then we'll let you know on our findings.
Yes, we will.
Continue with Z9 cameras. DPReview had finally put out a review of the camera, and they call it the best camera ever tested.
That's actually quite a statement. They've said the Nikon Z9 is Nikon's first pro-level mirrorless camera. The result is the most DSLR-like mirrorless camera we've ever used. It's perhaps the most complete camera we've ever tested. It shoots excellent 45 megapixel images up to 30 frames per second. 8K video, all the things we know. It says, overall, it combines the best of a DSLR and a video camera in a single body. They have published a kind of chart of the likes and dislikes. The likes include things like impressive image quality in both RAW and JPEG, the 20 frames per second with full AF, easy to configure AF system, responsive viewfinder with near zero lag and no blackout. They like the fact that it feels like a DSLR.
Yeah. But it's interesting what they say about feeling like DSLR. Obviously, they say coming from something like D5 and D6, you know, for those photographers, again, very specific niche, I would use the camera of its size.
It's true.
It feels straight away, right in your hands. And the EVF, which was at 60 frames per second before the firmware release, was already fantastic.
Yeah.
Now with additional 120 frames per second, it's even better. So using EVF instead of optical viewfinder and making it feel very natural to people coming from DSLRs, that is, I think, a major achievement by Nikon.
Things they disliked included stepped E-shutter creates banding with fast flickering displays. This is essentially if you're using the electronic shutter, then you get banding when you're shooting an electronic display. Yeah. This is not specific to the Z9. This is actually something that applies to any of the Z cameras if you're using the electronic shutter from what I found, because I've seen it on my own Z6.
Just for example, if you, let's say, have a footballer running and then you have the advertisement displays at the back, and what you would generally notice is obviously the football is fine and the billboards may have a bit of bending in there. This generally applies to a lot of photographers covering sports events with a lot of lead billboards at the background. DPReview actually published a month ago an interview with a pro photographer, which I think we mentioned a few issues before, where he talks about his experience with Z9, and he says that, look, I've experienced this before, this is not new, it's been there.
It's down to your shutter speed as well.
Exactly, and it's just part of it. So it's not an issue as people make it out to be.
Yeah. They also said there's no quick way to adjust auto ISO minimum shutter speed. Again, that's all Nikon cameras that applies to. JPEG only when matching the peers 30 frames per second.
Okay.
Which is a fair enough argument. Larger and heavier than direct rivals. Don't personally have experience, so couldn't comment on that.
Well, if you look at the A1, which is more of a Z6, Z7
body
size and weight, it's a little bit bigger, a little bit thicker, but it's kind of more of this size. And then you got obviously Z9, which is a built-in grip effectively. So I guess if you're a travel photographer, maybe it's not the camera for you. But if you're pro and if you don't mind to carry heavy stuff, then this is the camera for you.
But isn't it funny how they comment on the fact that they love how DSLR-like it feels, but the con is that it's too heavy and bulky?
Yeah. I think they're like all of us waiting for Z8, you know, and saving money.
I see.
Day by day, saving on coffees every day.
Yes.
And, skipping lunches.
Skipping lunches. Beans and rice for you.
Because every little helps.
They also dislike the customization options that are extensive but don't give access to every feature, and the fact there's no 10-bit HDR stills capability.
Yeah, I think we're going to come back to that at some point, not today, but it's an interesting article from Tom Hogan who said that Sony went from the worst UI in history of DSLRs to the best in 10 years. And Nikon is starting to significantly lag in that space, and that the interface, internal menu interface has to change. Now, it's a valid criticism. I didn't find it particularly difficult because we've been using Nikon cameras for donkey's years, really. So in terms of this, you get used to those things.
I would say for me, it's been an advantage that I can still pick up a D200 and know pretty much where everything's going to be. Obviously, there's more menu options now with modern cameras, with modern Z cameras. You've got so many more options. But actually, for me, it's an advantage that the user interface hasn't changed that much in the years. But I can understand that maybe it's not as intuitive as some people would like.
Well, I have experience with Fuji cameras, and I still feel that Nikon interface is miles ahead of it. I never use Sony's, especially the latest ones. So if you are a Sony user of the latest cameras, no fanboyism, please, but if you have experience A1, do let us know how the menus feels and look. So that's all it is. But again, we don't want to make it a console war. It's not PlayStation versus Xbox or Sony versus the rest of the world. We're here to listen and normal feedback.
That's right.
Looking at just a rating that they give, it's a 94% gold award. So it's the highest award that DPReview gave to any camera. And Nikon Rooms actually compiled this interesting graph for us. So they have 94% for Z9, A1 gets 93%, and then you've got EOS 1DX at 92%, EOS R5, which is a current mirrorless offering from Canon, is at 91%, etc., etc. It seems that at this moment in life, Z9 is the GOAT.
It is the goat. Had to throw the goats in there, didn't we?
Exactly. From now on,
Yeah.
the goats are here.
Every week something will be a goat.
All right. From one review to another one, DxO Mark has finally tested the Z9 sensor, and they gave it a score of 98, which is on par with Sony A1 and 2 points better than Canon R3. So those are kind of the main contenders for the top spot from the major manufacturers. So what did they say, Becky?
They said, given the balance between quality and high frame rates, the Nikon Z9 is a phenomenal performer. Strong results at base ISO with maximum dynamic range and excellent color depth at most ISOs are highly attractive. Even if both the Sony A1 and the Canon EOS R3 have a slight edge in dynamic range at just about every other ISO setting, which is interesting. Nevertheless, the Nikon Z9 is a formidable rival to both, especially the latter, given that camera's lower pixel count. With such an incredibly aspiring specification, along with the sensor performance to match, the Z9 is a pioneering product for the Z series and is easy to recommend.
Absolutely. The importance of that score as well is for the camera that shoots at 20 frames raw. That's the thing. So it's a fast sports camera, which is not really a contender for studio camera, which would, let's say, excel in dynamic range, etc. So,
Yes.
But it performs on par with other brands, so which is very important. So overall is 98 score, which is really good. So I had to look at the comparison with other cameras. So let's say versus Canon R3 is 98 over 96. With A1 is they basically equal at score 98. And I also looked at other Nikon cameras that DxO compared. And I looked at D6. They didn't have D6. The last pro camera that they reviewed was, I think, D4, D4S.
Wow.
So what I decided to do is I decided to look at cameras with effectively the same resolution sensor, so 46 megapixel sensor. And here we have D850 and then Z7 too. I didn't use Z7 because it's basically the same thing. So
Yeah.
in terms of this, overall score is Z9 gets 98 while D850 and Z7 gets 100.
Yes, Z7 II in this case.
Z7 II in this
Yeah.
case. So, and this is effectively just based on slightly better dynamic range.
Yeah.
So, but keep in mind that those cameras are a lot slower. So there are 2 points to have here. First of all, your Z7 or Z7 II is still a fantastic camera for studio work and for landscape work with the best dynamic range, while Z9 we're very, very slightly behind. So it's generally, I would say, probably unnoticeable. So, but pixel peepers would tell me otherwise. Second point to take out from here, your DSLR, in this case D850, is still a good camera, so you don't really need to sell it if you don't want to. But Z9 excels in everything else.
Yeah, I would say my general advice to people who have been asking, should I go for a Z9? If they've got a Z7 or a Z7 II or a D850 and they're doing studio, portrait, macro, food photography, basically anything that's not fast moving, landscape, that kind of stuff, your camera is fine.
Yeah.
Like really, you do not need to upgrade or change over. If your bread and butter is sports and wildlife, so fast moving action, or will involve that at some point, like maybe you're a bit of a jack of all trades and you do a number of different types of photography, then yes, the Z9 is going to be great.
Well, basically, you when you said this, you meant me. Effectively.
I meant you.
The
Z9 is not for you.
No, the Z9 is lovely, and it's nice to have it here. Obviously, it's got all this technology that I personally don't need.
Yeah.
I don't need 20 frames per second. I'm not going to shoot portraiture at 20 frames per second.
No.
I don't really need a pre-recording, but it's actually maybe nice to have because sometimes you miss, this, maybe you're like the model's lips are going to be slightly in a better position, maybe 1 second prior taking the shot, but generally, it's nice to have all those autofocus features, etc. I don't need it. I can get away with the D200 if I have to, So I shoot with medium format manual focus cameras, and I managed to get a shot somehow, you know. So in terms of it, it's nice to have this technology. I personally, as a Z8 person, if you believe that Z8 is going to be more of a D850 camera, let's say, and not sports camera like some people say, then
I think you should have a club like Z8 users group and just create it now in the hopes.
And I say, my people,
Exactly.
we want 100 megapixel sensor on the full frame.
I think you should start a club.
Because we don't shoot higher than 100 ISO.
No. But it is very true. I mean, really, what they say on the ISO performance for sports, so low light ISO performance, is that the Z9's performance is up at 2,451 ISO, while the D850 is at 2,660, and the Z7 II's at 2,841. That small difference is actually more of a big deal to me in terms of low light performance than the speed of autofocus.
Yeah, Becky's famous for doing nightclubs in Soho every weekend, so she needs a low ISO.
That's all I care about. I don't want to shoot high.
No, but if you look at the graphs, which you can do on DxOMark, and compare it with the 850 and Z7, two graphs in low light and ISO and also dynamic range, you'll see that the difference is actually very small.
So there you go.
All right, well, let's move on to more Z9 things. We have update from Nikon Rumors, who says that the next batch of Z9 deliveries, at least in the United States, is expected on May the 10th.
Yes. Now, if they're embarking on their great voyage and they're arriving in the US on May 10th, I imagine that they'll probably arrive in Europe at a similar time.
Yes.
We then have to wait another 2 weeks in the UK. So we don't, because we're special, because we voted to leave.
All right, but we had the shipment of Z9s this month already.
We had a small shipment of Z9s. We are steadily but slowly getting through the orders. We're still on day one orders at the moment over here in the UK. I don't know a single retailer that has gotten through their day one orders yet. We're really hoping that whatever the delivery arrives in May will be a more generous offering from Nikon. Obviously, we don't know until those cameras land in Europe and someone allocates them. We actually don't know how many we'll receive. But just, patience is a virtue at this stage.
Okay, I think the reason why in UK it's taken so long because Richie himself is personally hand delivering the cameras to the customers.
See, that's it.
And obviously, knowing National Rail in the UK, it takes time.
It does take time, yeah. It's slow progress.
The final bit of the news on Z9 is company Really Right Stuff finally opened their L plates for pre-order. So you can order them on places like Really Right Stuff website and B&H and whoever else sells them. So they are available and they are expensive. So Really Right Stuff joins Kirk, Small Rig, Tilda, which is a cinematography manufacturer. So they do all those big rigs for cinematographers.
Right.
Join all those companies releasing L plates for Z9. So I think there's a choice for any budgets right now. So, but if you are a Really Right Stuff fan, then you can pre-order yours now.
There you go. Now, on to software updates. So we have a new Nikon SnapBridge version 2.9.0 released for iOS and Android.
Now with more user-friendly design.
Wow.
Yeah. They also included the following cameras that used to be compatible with wireless mobile utility. So now they brought them under SnapBridge umbrella, okay?
Finally.
All right, so we have some oldies but goodies. So we got D750, D7200, D7100, D55, 53, and 3300s. Now DF,
wow,
Nikon DF is there finally, and then we got J5, Nikon One System, P900 Coolpix, AW130, S7000, S3700 as well. They also fixed some minor bug fixes as well.
I'm very happy with that. The SnapBridge tool can only get better from this stage.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very functional now, but the more they can do to make it user-friendly, the better, really.
The Apple release came out last week, and the Android release will be available while you're watching this video. Now we have also release of some obscure software, which is called Nikon Pairing Tool for NX Field. So that's been updated to version 1.01. What it does is effectively a pairing tool for NX Field software that allows you to create network profiles for cameras like Z7 II, Z7, Z6 II, and Z6. So effectively, I think it's all built into Z9 already. So this enables you to use other cameras with this software. So now, keep that in mind. For you to be able to use those cameras, you have to send them to Nikon, which will require a fee for service updates at Nikon Authorized Center. I don't think we've heard that before.
No, this is unusual. Normally, updates are not charged for unless in the video update or upgrade scenario.
So yes, effectively, NX Field will work with Z9 out of the box.
Yes.
But if you want to use your Z7 or Z6 cameras and the generation 2 of these cameras, you need to send your camera first to Nikon to enable that feature via a firmware update. So similar to Z6 RAW, remember back in the day it would cost £200. So, and then you will use this NX Field tool to create a profile and use it with NX Field.
The fact that it's a fee for service update is kind of interesting. In the UK, the Nikon service is all done by fixation, but I would assume that you can book it in through your usual Nikon website, service support website, and then send your camera off if you want to do that. The pairing tool now has a signed digital certificate, meaning the message Windows protected your PC is no longer displayed on the first launch after download.
All right, and that's what 1.01 does to your software. Digital certificates has to do with the security of setting up of different bits working together. So like corporate mails and things like this. So,
yes.
And having the right certificate to the right thing sometimes can take ages to set up. So I guess that firmware update fixes those issues.
Very helpful.
Okay, well, let's move on to some third-party news. So this one comes from BPI News, and it's called Trade Solidarity with the Ukraine. With the current conflict in the Ukraine, we see a lot of camera manufacturers as taking a stand against Russian aggression in the Ukraine. So BPI, who reports this news, they say that manufacturers have stopped selling the goods in Russia, first of all, but also in UK, they're raising the funds to support Ukraine internally between their staff, as well as we have Nikon official response on the matter. They say, we are saddened with the tragic events in Ukraine. Our thoughts very much remain with all those affected, and we are hoping for peaceful resolution. We are continuously evaluating the changing situation. We stand together with our desire for peace in the region. I think this is message, not just manufacturers which are taking a stand against the aggression, but also what you can do to help people who are suffering. Mm-hmm. You've got software developers in the Ukraine that you can help directly. You can donate to places like British Red Cross, who also help the matter.
You can also meet up with your local charities who may be doing collections and actually providing resources, much needed things for Ukrainian refugees as well. There are plenty of things that can be done, and we're glad that the BPI News are reporting on this.
Fantastic. The other bit that comes from BPI is about Laowa. Laowa, who is a Chinese manufacturer, officially comes to the UK. So now, instead of ordering your goods from China and paying import duties, you can now order your lenses from your local dealers. The interesting thing that Laowa did in this case, they didn't just choose distributor who sells the lenses to the dealers. They actually came here directly.
Yeah.
So, and the way they say it is, we are here so we can pass those savings to the dealers and to the buyers as well.
Right.
Speaking of Laowa, they actually announced another shift lens on top of the 20mm, which we mentioned a couple of weeks ago. So they now announced a 50mm f4 lens, which is supposed to be the world's widest shift lens for full-frame cameras with zero distortion.
Mm-hmm. This is available for Nikon F and Z mounts. Apparently it has, according to them, top-notch image quality and extremely close focusing distance, and is going to retail for $1,199.
That's a lot of dollars.
It is a lot of dollars, but for a 15mm, if you look at, for example, I know it's not a Nikon lens, but you look at the Nikon 19mm, which is $2,000.
That's a lot more dollars.
It's a lot more dollars.
That's true. Speaking of dollars, Kochkin finally announced the release of APO Lanthar 50mm f2 full-frame lens for Nikon Z cameras. We talked about them being rumored, so now there's official release. It's coming in May. It's $990, and apparently it's beautiful. What they say is actually that Nikon Z mount version is all new while retaining the same high performance thanks to apochromatic design. Mm-hmm. Well, 50 f2 is known for being one of their top line lenses from them, and according to Leica users, it's basically one of the sharpest 50mm and competes with Leica very well. So I am personally looking forward to using it on Z6 in May 2022.
Yes, we will be testing it out. As some of you will have heard, we are going to be stocking the Voigtlander Z-mount lenses. In fact, we already stocked the 35mm f1.2 APS-C lens, which is a lovely little lens actually to go on your ZFC or your Z50.
Absolutely. We'll let you know once the pre-order on our website is up. Another Voigtlander lens, another Voigtlander lens that comes out in May as well is 23mm 1.2 aspherical lens, which is DX lens for Z mount. So this one is 35mm in DX. So if you got 35 already out, then you're going to have 23 for that nicer, wider angle of view. Mm-hmm. The interesting thing about this is actually 12 diaphragm blades for extra battery bokeh.
That's going to be nice, isn't it?
I think so, yeah. And the shortest focusing distance is only 18 centimeters, which is actually quite close for 35mm, isn't it? Okay, and it looks very nice again, very similar to 35mm lens and about the same size as well. So again, if you go ZFC, this is definitely a good contender. The last bit of news is Adobe released their updates, the April updates for their Creative Suite. That includes, obviously, the popular photographers and videographers apps like Photoshop, Lightroom, and Adobe Premiere. But we're going to talk about Lightroom.
The April 2022 release of Lightroom Desktop version 5.3 and mobile version 7.3 provides support for new cameras, lenses, and bug fixes. Obviously, there is a full list of supported cameras and lenses and bug fixes, which you can have a look at.
All right. So one thing that is important to mention is Z9 and high efficiency RAW support. So
Indeed.
high efficiency RAW support is basically supported on all devices except the Windows devices with ARM chip, which is ARM64 and ARM version 7 chips, as well as x86 for Android. So again, if you got one of those devices, I think Microsoft Surface tablets will have those. You can also Google all the devices that have ARM chips and Windows on them. So have a look at them. So if you got one of those devices, you won't be able to use high efficiency RAW in your Lightroom, but everywhere else it should be fine. The Apple products that are made by ARM as well, they should see those high efficiency RAWs, no problem.
Another point on the high efficiency RAW compatibility is it has been flagged up to us recently. There are other software companies that are struggling with the high efficiency RAW files. So I think this week we had Topaz AI as
yes,
one
that
of
was flagged by our viewers, right?
Yeah. So if you are having difficulty with your software and you've got a Z9 and you're using high efficiency RAW, it may just be that the software is not compatible and it will need an update. Different companies take different lengths of time, obviously, to do their updates. But in the meantime, you can always use the free Nikon software, convert your files, and then bring them into your chosen software.
Yeah, it's very interesting because you look into those and you look in the comments with regards to high efficiency RAW on Z9. A lot of people say it's to do with Intel chips and ARM chips, and it's to do with some sort of SDK that is they're not using. Those are tools for the developers. So it's a very complicated path, and I still don't know the answer. So once we kind of have more or less answer why is it happening, why the ARM chips having issues with that, we will let you know. I think one of the interesting features that mobile version of Lightroom finally got, and I think that's the best feature ever, it says in Lightroom OS you can now delete your Adobe account directly from your Lightroom for mobile iOS app.
I wonder who complained about not being able to delete their account altogether from their mobile app, that they had to add that.
Well, they just didn't know that they need that feature.
Yeah. So if you ever want to delete your account or for information how to do it, you can see delete your Adobe account.
Put your opinion about software subscriptions in the comment below.
No, don't. We don't want to know. Okay, so there are some Premiere updates.
Yes, so they finally updated Premiere. And you know what I hate about the updates? When they completely change the interface.
I already hate the interface of Premiere as it is, to be completely honest.
The Premiere interface is not that bad once you get used to it.
Yes,
And it's actually quite good. The problem is you want to start a new project now, it's completely redesigned new project window.
Oh no.
And when you're doing a project really quickly and you want to have your visit out as soon as possible and you need to spend another 15 minutes just trying to figure out how those things work now,
That's us.
that's not a good design choice, Adobe.
No.
Please send me a free subscription.
Anyway, although we don't talk about our personal software uses, obviously we do use Adobe Premiere to edit.
Yeah.
And we probably will be reporting about how much we hate the update.
Yeah, export dialog also changed. And that one a little bit more intuitive, but it's just, again, pain in the neck trying to figure out how to find the features that you got used to using.
You can tell me about it later because I'm going to get stuck otherwise.
All right, well, let's move on to We Can Read and Watch.
Yes. So first we have an obituary for you. So Dirk Halstead, who was a photojournalist who captured history, dies at 85. We have the New York Times article and the obituary in the Times UK website for you to have a read of.
Yeah, Dirk Halstead captured historical moments from President Reagan meeting with Soviet leader Gorbachev or Nixon during 1968 campaign, but also war in Vietnam.
Wow.
He's been everywhere.
Born in 1936, he began photography at the age of 15 when his family actually gave him a Kodak Duoflex camera for Christmas. The rest, honestly, is history. If you would like to read about his life and his work, then do check out the articles in the description box and in the podcast notes.
And you know what's funny thing is he captured all those historical moments without having Z9.
It is possible to shoot film and capture some iconic moments.
Yeah, incredible. And that's a wrap.
Sure, that works. Thank you very much for watching and or listening. Please give us a like and a subscribe if you're on YouTube. We are going for 20k subscribers this year. We would love you to join the clan. We have lots of very exciting things in store for our subscribers over the next few months. If you're listening to us on a if you're listening to us, oh my God.
If you listen to us on walkie-talkies.
If you're listening to us on a Sony Walkman in the 1990s, then please give us a rating.
We're going to send you a tape.
Here we are. If you're listening to us on a podcast platform, give us a rating, a review. We would love it if you would also follow us.
Absolutely. If you don't want to see these lovely faces, you can also listen to us on a wonderful hi-fi in your car.
On Apple Podcasts, Spotify.
We are now on Amazon Music as well. So come and join us for a true Nikon experience.
That's right. If you'd like to find us on the internet, you can find us on Instagram.
Yes, I'm at Konstantin Kochkin on IG, and you?
I'm at Rebecca_Danese, and the shop is at Nikon at Grays.
Yeah, there's some good content in there. And we are actually thinking of adding more interactive features with you.
Yeah, let us know if you have any wish lists for that.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.